All right. So functional and factory class groups. Did I mention that this was important? This is the big gotcha. I mean, if this is something that we should not have questions about at the end of the week. It's happened to me once, and it was maddening. Maddening in myself because I evidently hadn't done a good enough job explaining it. Because this is essential Magento. This is how overrides happen. Okay? So we're going to start to actually instantiate Magento objects. And we're going to grab different instances from different places. Ooh. All right, so quick reminder, gang of four. I can never remember their names. But yeah. Four programming folk. They came up with this idea of like, oh, why don't we have a class actually instantiate other classes? It's factory. That's what Magento does. Magento has a unique implementation of that. We'll touch on this. So what does this look like? Well, this is called realization in Magento. This is a call you'll see lots of places. Mage get model. And then first parameter is model class, and then you can pass in some arguments that get passed to a constructor. What does this do? So this is Mage. So this is that file that we opened earlier, appmage.php. That's this class. Inside is this function getModel, define. Okay, that actually maps to getModel instance. GetModel instance says getModel class name. Okay, from getModel class name we actually use getGroup class name. This is the only authoritative documentation that I have for calling a particular thing in Magento, which we'll be seeing in just a moment, class groups. I always struggled for what do you call it, short names, class prefix, what? It's class group in Magento. So again, we actually added this line in here, Mage core model config. This is where you can see this happening. So class Mage actually dips down into the configuration model. So this is a perfect example of what I was saying about how Magento interfaces with that configuration. With this class right here, if you ever have any question about structure of nodes, you can find your answer here. It's all right in there, and you'll see the simple XML calls and everything. You can't know this class well enough. You don't have to know this class, but if you're looking for an answer that I haven't given you or you can't find and it involves configuration, it's in here. Okay? So if you want to leave, now's the time. There's no going back from here. Once you go down this road, you're going to start getting really excited. Mage catalog model product. This is what gets it. Here's that call to get model, and then eventually you have get config, get model instance, blah, 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 blah. It goes through here. This is the important stuff to remember. This is configured. This is a configuration value, okay? This is it. This is everything. Config global models. There's config global models, config global helpers, and config global blocks. This is why those folders are actually, they're up to you what you want to call them. This right here is the prefix. And because name and position in the file system are one and the same, this always will map to a file system. This always will be a prefix for the class name contained in that file. All right? So here is everything you need to know about class group definitions in Magento. Config global, and then either models, helpers, blocks. Inside that node, you make a node that is whatever you want it to be. So get model uses the configuration object to look in global, in the models tag, and then we'll try and match this against something under models. Okay? So if I had foo here, that configuration structure that's been assembled, if I say mage get model foo / whatever, the application will look will use the configuration object to look in global models for a node named foo. And then in there, a node named class, which specifies this class prefix. So this becomes the first part of the class name. If I have product here, then the system is going to try and instantiate a class, Mage catalog. It's going to match catalog under here and try and instantiate Mage catalog model product.
With a capital P.
With a capital P. Yeah. So your naming in this case uses UC words, PHP function UC words, and I think there's a default delimiter in there, and I think the default delimiter is underscore. So I'm sorry to harp on this, but it's just it's imperative. This here, configuration model is used to try and find config level models. Look for that node here, inside that node, look for a class, and then this is the beginning of the class name. To that, we append, basically this is a capital, or if there's, and there will be an underscore notation here. Similarly, it goes through UC words. And because of our, the conventions that we have operating in our system, well, that would be found at, app code core, Mage, catalog, model, product.php. That should be crystal clear to everyone. If it's not, please let me know right now, and I can explain this even more. Okay? And then down here, of course, we have resource models, because we just want to complicate things. As soon as you learn one thing, we want to show you another. So similarly to get model, there is a get resource model call, and get resource model does the same thing. Actually, the catalog product resource model. So this is how we would actually get the model that knows about storage of products. We would have the same call. It would just be Mage get resource model catalog/product. And similarly, configuration object will be used. We'll find. We'd match catalog, but inside catalog we would look for resource model. And in resource model, we actually define another node under models. So then actually the system will hit this and then go look under models for a node, catalog resource EAV MySQL 4, and we'll look for a class node in there. We'll touch on all that soon, but that's just that's the pattern in Magento for blocks and helpers and models. Once again, let us open up Mage CMS index controller, instantiate a product model and resource model, and create a sales helper and a template block instance. Oh, we're going to play with all of the different types here. We're not actually going to deal with that configuration stuff yet, but we're going to look at the factory methods that are involved. So these factory methods, and I haven't shown you all of them here. I'll give you the rundown for each of these. And in different contexts, you'll see different methods or syntaxes for instantiating models using the factory methods. So you'll have this is not a complete list. So you can have Mage get model, okay, and then class group, something. So these are all static method calls, which is why we use the Pamayam Nakuditayam. That's real PHP cocktail party stuff. Yeah, so double colon. In Hebrew, I think. Mage get model, class group. So this is, okay. So that's model. Get resource model, same thing, Mage. Get resource model. Okay. And for helpers, of course, we have get model, get resource model. So how would we get a helper? No. it's Mage helper. Just helper. Just cause they can. All right. So let's see, helper. And tricky thing with helpers, by the way, I'll go ahead and tell you this because it'll come up again. You can actually just specify sales. And that's actually, in class group notation, that actually maps to sales/data. Okay? That's just one of those other things about the system. If you don't specify, if you only specify a class group, the system will actually look for a data helper. This sales here will actually map to a configuration file, or will hopefully, anyway, the config object will look in config global helpers for a node with the value sales. Okay? So hopefully this, in our configuration structure, will have sales, and then inside sales, we look for class. Okay? And then in that class node is where we would specify mage sales helper. Okay? That's the connection. All right? If I said mage sales not much of a helper, then it would look in a folder mage sales not much of a helper data.php. I mean, that's all these strings do. But that maps, that has to map to the file system somewhere, okay? So, and that's what that's what these factory methods do with this class group notation. This is exciting stuff. Okay. All right. So, here we are at the end of lesson 6, and we're going to take a second to instantiate the product model, product resource model, sales helper, and the template block instance. So really this is just, again, not a very practical example, but something that should help kind of get you, those of you who haven't done this before, familiar with working with these factory methods. And we'll also kind of take a look again at what's going on inside the configuration. So you may have the index controller open. If not, it's again that's under App Code Core Mage CMS controllers, little c controllers, index.php. All right, so here we are in our index action once again. And it's very, very easy to instantiate these models and helpers and blocks. You can simply just say, well, let's do zend debug dump call, and I'll just pass different things in here. So the first one we'll do is mage get model catalog product. So in your own code, if you ever need to instantiate a product model, this is how you would do it. So this is just basic 101 level Magento. So let's see what the effect is. We'll go back to our browser here. Oh, we got a lot of stuff going on here. Let's see. But basically, yeah, that's what's going on.
we have a model. Mage catalog model product. You'll see this up at the top here. Yeah. So that's that. So what happened? But let's look at what happened. Well, Mage get model. So again, this is why I can't recommend enough having a modern professional IDE, where, especially for a system like Magento, where you can jump through function calls and get the PHP doc references, highlighting code completion, etc. And you can even use Xdebug to step through the code. It's a really tough system to learn if you don't if you can't navigate your way through these function calls, because they are a bit scattered. So what's happened here, of course, was we jumped from the Mage class. We jumped from our CMS index controller. We're using the Mage class. So here's Mage get model. Now, get model takes this string, right? So right here, model class is equal to catalog / product. And the arguments, in this case, would just be an empty array. Now, so that calls the config object's get model instance. So here we are over in Mage core model config, calling get model instance. So the model class, again, this is the string that's passed in. So this is equal to catalog product. And to determine the class name, we call get model class name. Get model class name takes that thing that was passed in, and it does something interesting. It checks to see if there's a slash, and if there is, if there is a slash, which there will be pretty much all the time, we call get grouped class name. Now, grouped class name, that's the one that handles models, blocks, and helpers, and we'll take an argument here, model. So there are analogous functions all over the place. In this class, you can see helpers are called with get group class name, only they pass in helper. And blocks are called, only they get called with block. That's the difference. So this is the sort of the ultimate function here. So get group class name just takes this slash, explodes it, and checks in the configuration. So we have global models or global helpers, global blocks, and looks for, in here is looking for the group name here. So the group is the very first part of the string before the slash. So in our case, group here is equal to catalog. And then before we start to build out a class name, though, this is where we check for rewrites. And I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. But basically, if we see a rewrite, we'll use the rewritten class name. Else, we'll go through, Magento has some lower level functions. But basically, we go here and we build out our class name based on what's present in that class node under catalog. So in our case, if you look in the configuration under Mage catalog, let's see, etc config models catalog class. This is how we sort of resolve our way here. So from this, we get Mage catalog model as our class prefix, and we append the class that we passed in, and that's the second part. That's what's after the slash. Append that, and then run this UCWords function on it, and get our class name. And then we call, then we'll return the class name, and eventually, and then we'll call new, and then the autoloader kicks in, et cetera, and so forth. So that's how that works. And again, we'll be talking about this even more later because you can't talk about this enough while you're learning it. So that's the product model. Now, for the resource model, something interesting. What happens here, I'll go ahead and show you, is we'll use Mage get resource model. Resource model is still going to match catalog, but then inside of the catalog node, it's going to look for resource model node. And then this value here, which just needs to be a unique string, becomes another node that we look for under models here. And in here, we get the class prefix for resource models. And of course, we'll be dealing with this more later as well. So what does that look like when we want to instantiate that? So all we have to do is say Mage get resource model. And then here, rather than just dump the entire class, I'll just say die. Let's see. I'll assign this to a variable. Actually, I'll do this. Echo get class. And then die. Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. So you see, though, hopefully you notice, we still have product at the end, but we're definitely not dealing with Mage catalog model anymore. But all we're dealing with is exactly what we found in the configuration. Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. See how that works? We just take the prefix that we find. That's basically is found through that first part of the string before the slash, and then we just add the class name to it. And that path, of course, would be Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. It's very easy, but hard to learn. So again, the class name is the location in the file system. Good. And for sales helper and template block instance, it's more of the same. For helpers, we just simply call helper. Now, the sales helper is interesting because we only need to pass sales. That's the interesting thing with helpers, is that if you don't pass in some other part after a slash, if you don't have a slash, you're going to get this default behavior. The default name for helpers and modules is data. So generally throughout the code in Magento, you'll see calls like this, Mage helper sales, or catalog, or whatever. But what that's actually going to resolve to is sales data. That just happens in the config object. In fact, I think I can show you. Yeah. So get helper class name. I'm not sure why this was done, but it was done. So that's the one that behaves a little bit differently. But you can see all you do is we're just appending slash data if there's no slash present. So that's all that's happening there. So these two calls here, sales, Mage helper sales or Mage helper sales data, they accomplish the same thing. And then on the front end, let's see. Yep, Mage sales helper data. And again, Mage sales helper is a class prefix under global helpers sales. And that leaves the catalog No, the template block instance. So this would be we're going to use the core template block. This is the basis, incidentally, and of course this is, we really will be talking about this in depth on Wednesday with when we get into rendering. But the core template block is the main block that you have, main block that you're using when you have a block class that uses a template. It just has some of the necessary chain of functions, fetch view, render view, and a specific protected toHTML method that allow the rendering system to work its magic on your block. Just take that on faith, and we'll actually look at the internals of that on Wednesday. So, core. So, and again, this is Mage core. So this is the core module inside the Mage namespace, which is in the core code pool. But again, that can be confusing. So Mage core block template. That's this class here. So now this one, though, template blocks are a little bit different. I'm sorry, not template blocks, but blocks in general are different. They are, there's no Mage, well, there is a get block singleton, but you don't want to use this. You instantiate your block against the layout object. So the layout object is, in a way, it's kind of similar to, I guess it's kind of similar to the config object. So Mage core model config, that's the class that knows about the configuration. Well, the layout object, which is Mage core model layout, is the one that should know about all the blocks that have been instantiated in the system. So, how do we do that? Well, we can do that any number of ways because we're in a controller. I'll show you the method that's used. It can be used anywhere. And that's Mage app get layout, and then from the layout object we call create block. So the analogous thing to Mage get model or Mage helper is getting the layout object and calling the create block method, and then you just simply pass in the type, and the syntax is the same to what we've seen so far. So we'll just pass in core template. Okay. So with Mage app get layout, create block, core template, perfect. Now if I go and I look at and we've got it. Any questions? Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. That's good. We're not doing anything practical here. We're just giving you guys a chance to get your hands on this. So a couple of things just to remind you about before we close out this lesson, and that's that there are these factory methods that you use. They end up interacting with the configuration, and based on the configuration, you end up with objects. And you have these different ways of getting it. So the create block is the most distinct in that you have to use the layout object. And helpers, the other pitfall. Just remember that a helper the helper factory method with no / in it, it's going to be whatever module / data. Okay. Very good. Okay, go ahead and revert everything in your index controller because we're good Magento developers. And we're done.